President Trump's economic success rests on the passage of his one big, beautiful bill. We've been talking about this for months. And the timeline on the big, beautiful bill is still somewhat in doubt because obviously it has to pass through the House and then a version has to pass through the Senate. And then there's going to be reconciliation between the House bill and the Senate bill. And so whatever you see in the House bill might not end up in the final bill. However, massive controversy already breaking out in the House over where the cuts are going to come from. Many House Republicans are calling for cuts that are going to make up for the loss in revenue to the federal government that occurs when taxes are not increased. Now, as you know from sort of conservative discussions for the last 50 years, there's something called the Laffer curve. The Laffer curve is a suggestion by the economist Art Laffer that if you're looking for sort of the proper rate of taxation, it can't be 0 because then the government has no money to spend. And it also can't be 100 because then the government has no money to spend. No one will actually go out and do business if they are going to have all of their money removed by the federal government. So the Laffer curve is a suggestion that there is, in fact, a point at which if you tax people more, then you will actually end up with declining government revenues as a result because people will simply work less in order to avoid the top tax bracket, for example. And there's certainly truth to that. It's unclear where exactly the inflection point is with regard to the Laffer curve. However, it has been long-standing conservative economic dogma that if you increase taxes, you will end up quashing economic growth because you're taking money away from the more efficient private sector and sticking it in the public sector where it gets doled out by a bunch of politicians to their favorite pet projects. Also, how you look at government revenue differs between conservatives and people on the left. People on the left believe that the government basically owns your money and then allows you to keep some of it. Conservatives believe you own your money and then you have to give some of it to the government in order to do public services, for example. Okay, so when it comes to even the discussions of what government revenue looks like, the real discussion that should be had, and it's the discussion no one will ever have, is what is the proper role of government in our lives? Why is it that our government is spending $6-7 trillion a year on the federal level? This was not the case when the original country was founded. When the United States was founded, the original expenditures by the federal government were absolutely minimal, and it stayed that way except for times of war, like the Civil War, all the way up through essentially the end of World War I. And then government spending began to grow slowly, and then with FDR, it just exploded, all out of proportion. And so now we have $7 trillion being spent every single year. That's what's racking up the national debt. And so there are a couple of sort of different takes on what should be done. A traditional classical conservative might say, we need to cut massive reams of government spending. But push it all back down to the states. If the states wish to do things like Medicare and Medicaid, then the states can do that. But it shouldn't be up to a taxpayer from Montana to pay for the health care of a guy from California because he's 70 years old, for example. And then you have the sort of Republican Party position, which is let's cut around the edges. And then you have the Democratic Party position, which is let's never cut anything ever for the rest of time. The latter two positions are the ones the American people have opted for. The latter two positions are let's spend all the money in the world and let's spend just slightly less than all the money in the world. And that's what a lot of the debate is with regard to this current GOP tax bill inside the Republican caucus. There are a bunch of Republicans who believe that cutting spending in any way, shape, or form is detrimental to Republican electoral chances. The American people don't want it. And by polling, basically, there's truth to that. By polling, the American people say they don't want the government to be so big and provide so many services. And then when you ask them which services they would like cut, they scratch their head and really have no idea of the answer to that question. Then you have sort of traditional Republicans who say, listen, if we're ever going to get to anything more like big restructuring of government, you have to start somewhere, or we are going to plunge off the debt cliff. Okay, so all of this is manifesting in the debate over the current big, beautiful bill in the Republican House. There's no question spending is going to continue to increase. The only question is whether the rate of the increase is slightly slower or slightly faster. We'll get to more on this in a moment. First, many fitness influencers offer minimal value at premium prices, but Fitbod provides comprehensive workout planning and tracking tools designed to help you maintain consistency and achieve the kind of progress you want. You've heard me talk about Fitbod before. Let me reiterate. It is a game changer when it comes to building muscle and creating workout routines that are ideal for you and your body. So just last week, I opened up the app before heading to the gym. Within seconds, it created a personalized workout based on my goals and available equipment. This, by the way, is great when you're traveling. The app noticed which muscle groups I'd been hitting harder. It automatically adjusted to focus on other muscle groups. Again, it's the personalization aspect that is really wonderful, not just personalized to you, but also about the kinds of equipment you have available, because not all gyms are the same. Expert certified personal trainers have fine-tuned their approach to deliver proven exercise science and industry best practices directly to you. Plus, you can transform your fitness journey with over 1,000 demonstration videos to perfect your form and technique. You can keep your fitness routine fresh and engaging. The app continuously introduces variety through new exercises, rep patterns, innovative supersets, challenging circuits, eliminating that workout monotony for good. Level up your workout. Join FitBod today. Get your personalized workout plan. Get 25% off your subscription or try the app free for 7 days at fitbod.me/Shapiro. That's FITBOD.me/Shapiro. According to the Wall Street Journal, the Republican tax bill looks very different depending on your income and your political lens. For the top sliver of taxpayers, it gives a permanent extension and expansion of expiring tax cuts from 2017, coupled with some new limits. Middle-income households would get permanent tax cut extensions as well. They would also gain temporary tax cuts, including a larger standard deduction and child tax credit and targeted benefits for senior citizens and people receiving tips and overtime pay. There's not much in the tax cut bill for people who are low income, mainly because people who are low income are not paying taxes in the United States. This is why whenever people say this tax bill disproportionately benefits the rich. Well, I mean, I would assume because the rich absolutely overpay proportionally based on their income, like wildly disproportionately. The top quintile of income earners in this country pay all net taxes in the country, all of them. Net taxes meaning the amount you pay to the government versus the services you get back from the government. A lot of middle income people are paying taxes, but they're also receiving tremendous benefits back from the government in the form of various forms of welfare, social support, and all of the rest. Representative Blake Moore of Utah said this is not a bill for billionaire relief, but Democrats are casting the bill as an unacceptable giveaway to well-off people at the expense of most Americans. So there are a bunch of different provisions that are controversial here. One is the tax data, and then one is the question of where some cuts are coming from. So if you look at the actual material in the bill, the Tax Foundation has a good rundown on the bill, taxfoundation.org. And what they find through their preliminary analysis is that the tax provisions would increase long-run GDP by 0.6%, which is a solid increase in GDP, in national growth. It would reduce federal tax revenue by $4.1 trillion over the course of the next decade. Again, what does that mean? It means the federal government will take in less money than it would have if it left the top tax rates at a higher rate. So you're increasing growth, but you're decreasing the revenue to the government, the amount of money that the government steals from the taxpayers. On a dynamic basis, the revenue reduction would fall by 19% to $3.3 trillion over 10 years before the added interest costs. So they're saying that basically that $4.1 trillion that you're missing, that's assuming a static level of economic growth. If you include the economic growth, then you end up with more revenue back to the government, but you're still going to end up with, in addition to the deficit, of some $3.3 trillion. Overall, the bill would prevent tax increases on 62% of taxpayers that would occur if the Trump tax cuts were to expire. But there are other provisions that are being eliminated, like, for example, bonus depreciation and research and development expensing. So in some ways, this is a significantly more populist tax cut bill than the Trump tax cut bill the first time around. This is why, for example, there's no tax on tips included, but they're getting rid of bonus depreciation. The House-passed budget resolution would allow a $4.5 trillion increase in the deficit from tax cuts over the next decade, so long as spending is also cut by $1.7 trillion. But if they don't cut the spending, if that spending never materializes, then the cap on the tax cuts gets reduced dollar for dollar. So the question is where those cuts come from. This is where most of the controversy is occurring, not with regard to the tax rates per se, but with regard to the cuts. Where are the cuts occurring to offset some of the loss in revenue to the federal government? And the answer is in restructuring of Medicaid particularly. Well, that's all for now, folks. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and comment your thoughts down below. Be sure to check out all of the other great content on my channel. I'll see you here next time.